Today's objective in Algebra 2 is to factor completely, which means we're going to be doing multiple steps at the same time on the same problem. So our objective is to factor completely, which means everything has to be factored. We're going to start, before we get into actually factoring completely, we're going to start by reviewing GCF factoring. Remember, GCF stands for greatest common factor. So when we factor completely, you're going to start by using GCF. So let's review that first. So let's look at a problem like x cubed plus 2x squared plus 5x. What you do is you look at x cubed, 2x squared, and 5x, and you find the greatest common factor. What do all three things have in common? Here I have x cubed, here I have 2x squared, here I have 5x. If I look at the numbers, I have 1, 2, and 5. There's not a number that goes into 1, 2, and 5. But x cubed, x squared, and x, they all have an x in common. So I pull out the x. X times what is x cubed? X squared. X times what is 2x squared? 2x. X times what is 5x? 5. That's factoring using GCF. You find what they have in common and you pull that out. Let's do one more of those and then we'll get into what we're actually doing today. Problem number 2, 4x to the 5th plus 6x to the 3rd minus 10x squared. 4x to the 5th plus 6x to the 3rd minus 10x squared. To find the GCF, I look at 4, 6, and 10. What number goes into 4, 6, and 10? 2. Then I look at x to the 5th, x to the 3rd, and x squared. The rule on the x's is to always pull out the smallest group, so I'm going to pull out x squared. 2x squared times what is 4x to the 5th? 2 times 2 is 4. X squared times x to the 3rd is x to the 5th. 2 times what is 6? 3. X squared times what is x cubed? X. Minus 2 times what's 10? 5. And there's our answer. Okay. To factor completely, we have 2 steps. So to factor completely, we have 2 steps. Step 1 is factor using GCF. So step 1 is factor using GCF. So you have to look at the problem that you're given and find the GCF. Step 2, you're going to factor that answer using either trinomials or my father drives a red Mustang. So you're going to factor using GCF, and then you're going to factor that answer that you get using either trinomial factoring or my father drives a red Mustang. And remember, we reviewed both of those yesterday. Okay, so let's do a problem number 1. Problem number 1 is 2x cubed plus 4x squared minus 6x. 2x cubed plus 4x squared minus 6x. My first step is to factor using GCF, so I have to look at 2, 4, and 6. What number goes into 2, 4, and 6? 2 does. Then I look at x cubed, x squared, and x, and I pull an x out. When I do that, 2x times what is 2x cubed? Has to be x squared. 2x times what is 4x squared? 2 times what is 4? Has to be 2. X times what is x squared? Has to be an x. Minus 2 times what is 6? Has to be 3. And there's no x there because we pulled it out. Now, that was the GCF step. Now we have to take this x squared plus 2x minus 3 and we have to factor it. Now our choice is either trinomials, my father drives a red Mustang, or occasionally you'll even have difference of perfect squares. But the majority of the problems are either trinomials or my father drives a red Mustang. In this case, it's a trinomial. You need two numbers that multiply to -3 and add to 2. So two numbers that multiply to -3 and add to 2. Well, the only way I can get 3 is 1 and 3. To have a positive 2, I have to have -1, positive 3. This 2x in front, I just bring it down. This x squared plus 2x minus 3 becomes x minus 1, x plus 3. And there's our answer. So basically what we're doing in this lesson is combining all of the factoring that we've done into one problem. So let's look at another one, number 2. 2x to the 4th minus 5x to the 3rd minus 3x squared. Look at your numbers first. 2, 5, and 3. Is there a number that goes into 2, 5, and 3? No, there's not a number that goes into all three of those. So we ignore the numbers and work on our x's. X to the 4th, x to the 3rd, and x squared. What can we pull out of all of those? X squared. So all I'm going to have on the outside this time is an x squared. X squared times what is 2x to the 4th? This is like a 1 out here. 1 times what is 2? Has to be 2. X squared times what is x to the 4th? Has to be x squared. Minus x squared times what is 5x to the 3rd? Has to be 5x. Minus x squared times what is 3x squared? Has to be 3. Now we have to look at this 2x squared minus 5x minus 3, and we have to factor it. Because there's a number in front of that x squared, that means it's a my father drives a red Mustang. Remember, my father drives a red Mustang means 2 times 3, so 6. It's actually -6. Two numbers that multiply to -6 and add up to -5. So 6 is either 1 and 6 or 3 and 2. The only way I can get a -5 though with that -6 is with the 1 and 6. Has to be 1 and -6. Now that's the my and the father part of my father drives a red Mustang. Drive stands for divide, so I divide by 2, divide by 2. The red part stands for reduce. 1/2 is reduced. -6 over 2 though reduces to -3 over 1. And then we read from the bottom up. 1/2 is really 2x plus 1. -3 over 1 is really x minus 3. So 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 factors into 2x plus 1 and x minus 3. Now that's not my full answer because I forgot to bring down the x squared, so make sure you don't do that. So bring down the x squared and there's your answer. So we pulled out the GCF and then we factored what was left using my father drives a red Mustang. So let's look at a third one. Problem number 3 is going to be 10x squared minus 35x plus 30. So I start by looking for a GCF. 10x squared minus 35x plus 30. Look at 10, 35, and 30. What number goes into 10, 35, and 30? Has to be 5. Then I look at x squared x. There's no x here, so I can't pull an x out for my greatest common factor. The only thing I'm pulling out there is a 5, and that's okay. 5 times what is 10x squared? 5 times 2x squared, because 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times what is 35x? Has to be 7, because 5 times 7 is 35. 5 times what is 30? Has to be 6. So I pulled my 5 out, I did the GCF, and now I have to factor this. 2x squared minus 7x plus 6 has a number in front, so it's a My Father Drives a Red Mustang. 2 times 6 is 12. Two numbers that multiply to 12 and add up to negative 7. Well, 12 is 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. 1 and 12, there's no way to get a 7. 2 and 6, no way to get a 7. So we have to have 3 and 4. That 7 is negative, so they're both going to be negative. So that's the My and the Father. Drive stands for divide. Divide by 2, divide by 2. Reduce. Negative 3 over 2 doesn't reduce. Negative 4 over 2, though, reduces to negative 2 over 1. And then we read it bottom up. Bring the 5 that I had originally down so you don't forget it. That's a common mistake. Negative 3 over 2, remember, means 2x minus 3. Negative 2 over 1 means x minus 2. You read from the bottom up. The x goes with the bottom term, and you read from the bottom up. So our GCF was 5, and then we had 2x minus 3 and x minus 2. And you're done. Number 4. Number 4 is 3x to the 4th power minus 12x squared. 3x to the 4th minus 12x squared. We start the same way. Look at 3 and 12. What number goes into 3 and 12? 3. X to the 4th and x squared. What number goes into both of those? Or what goes into both of those? X squared. When I factor that out, 3x squared times what is 3x to the 4th? Well, 3 times 1 gives me 3, so I'm not going to put a 1 there. But x squared times x squared gives me that x to the 4th. 3x squared times what gives me that 12x squared? Has to be 4. Now, again, I look at what I ended up with, x squared minus 4. Can x squared minus 4 be factored? Yes, that's a difference of squares problem like we talked about yesterday and before. So I bring down the 3x squared and I factor this into x plus 2 and x minus 2. Remember, you take the square root of 4, which is 2 and 2, 1's plus, 1's minus. We're going to do one last problem, number 5. Number 5 is 8x to the 5th plus 46x to the 4th minus 12x to the 3rd. So I look at 8, 46, and 12. So 8, 46, and 12. What number goes into 8, 46, and 12? It has to be 2, because nothing else goes into all three of those. Then when I look at my x's, x to the 5th, x to the 4th, and x to the 3rd, I pull out the smallest group, which is the x to the 3rd. 2x to the 3rd times what is 8x to the 5th? That's the question you ask every single time. 2 times 4, x squared. 2 times what is 46x to the 4th? 2 times 23, x. 2 times what is 12? Minus 6. Then we're back at a regular trinomial, or My Father Drives a Red Mustang. When you do My Father, you get negative 24. That has to be 24 and negative 1. Divide by 4. 24 over 4 is 6 over 1. Negative 1/4 stays as it is. So bring down the 2x to the 3rd. Remember, I multiplied 4 times negative 6 to get negative 24. The only way to have negative 24 and positive 23 is 24 and negative 1. Divide by 4, reduce, and then read bottom up. X plus 6, 4x minus 1.